The sun rose slowly over the vast skyline of Lagos, casting warm golden light across glass towers, busy highways, and the endless movement of the city below. The sound of honking cars, distant street vendors calling out their morning prices, and the rhythmic rumble of yellow Danfo buses filled the air. Lagos was a city of dreams, where fortunes could rise overnight, and where ambition shaped destinies. But not every dream in Lagos was built on hard work. In a modest apartment tucked inside a lively neighborhood of Surulere lived a man named Chinedu Okafor. To the people around him, Chinedu seemed lucky. He dressed well, spent freely, and often spoke confidently about the big future he and his wife were building. But behind the polished shoes and easy smile was a man who preferred comfort over effort. His wife, Ada Okafor, was the complete opposite. Thousands of miles away, Ada lived in a small apartment abroad, working long shifts every single day. While Lagos slept, she cleaned offices, worked late hours, and saved every dollar she could. All for one dream: a home in Lagos. Every month, without fail, Ada sent money back to her husband. One quiet evening, as the warm orange glow of sunset filled Chinedu's living room, his phone buzzed. A message from Ada. "Chinedu, I just sent another transfer," her voice said gently in a voice note. "Please check the account. It should be enough for the land payment and maybe the first part of the building." Chinedu leaned back comfortably on the sofa, staring at the notification on his phone. Another transfer. He smiled slightly. "Yes, my hardworking wife," he muttered under his breath. He tapped the banking app, and the balance refreshed. The number was bigger than the last time. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to African Stories for more thrilling tales of love, betrayal, and drama straight from Africa. Outside, the laughter of neighbors drifted through the open window. Somewhere down the street, a generator hummed loudly as night slowly settled over Lagos. Instead of opening the folder labeled House Construction Plans, Chinedu opened another app instead. A luxury restaurant website. "Maybe just one nice dinner tonight," he whispered to himself. After all, there was always more money coming. Far away, Ada stood by the window of her small apartment abroad, looking at the dark sky. She smiled softly, imagining the home they would soon build together. But in Lagos, the dream she was working so hard for was slowly beginning to change. And Chinedu had no idea that his choices were about to lead him down a dangerous path. Night had fully settled over Lagos, but the city was far from asleep. Neon lights glowed across busy streets, music echoed through the warm tropical air, and luxury cars lined the entrance of one of the most popular nightclubs on Victoria Island. Inside, the atmosphere pulsed with energy. The bass from the music vibrated through the floor while groups of well-dressed guests laughed, danced, and celebrated another glamorous Lagos night. Among them sat Chinedu Okafor, leaning comfortably in a VIP section, a glass of expensive whiskey resting loosely in his hand. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who had already conquered the city. But the truth was far simpler. Every drink on the table, every bill being paid, came from the money his wife sent from abroad. Still, to everyone watching, Chinedu looked like a man with power. And that was exactly what caught the attention of a woman across the room. Her name was Vanessa Williams. Vanessa was striking, tall, elegant, and dressed in a shimmering red dress that reflected the nightclub lights like fire. But her beauty wasn't the only thing that made her dangerous. Vanessa was ambitious. She understood Lagos well, and she knew that the right man could change her entire future. From across the room, she studied Chinedu carefully. The watch on his wrist, the confidence in his posture, the way the waiters rushed to his table. A wealthy man, she thought. Exactly the kind she had been waiting for. Moments later, she walked toward him. "Good evening," Vanessa said smoothly, her voice almost lost under the music. "Mind if I join you?" Chinedu looked up, and instantly smiled. "Not at all," he replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "A beautiful woman should never stand alone in a place like this." Vanessa sat down gracefully, crossing her legs as she glanced around the table filled with drinks. "You must be doing very well for yourself," she said casually. Chinedu leaned back confidently. "Oh, just a few businesses here and there," he replied with a relaxed shrug. "Real estate investments mostly. Lagos is full of opportunities if you know where to look." Vanessa's eyes sparkled with interest. Impressive, she said softly. And just like that, the lie began to grow. Over the next few hours, the two laughed, drank, and shared stories under the flashing lights of the club. Chinedu painted a picture of success, of properties, investments, and future wealth. Vanessa listened carefully, every word pulling her closer. By the time the music slowed and the night began to fade, the distance between them had disappeared. What began as a simple conversation quickly turned into something far more dangerous. And somewhere far away, Ada continued working tirelessly, completely unaware that in Lagos, her husband had just stepped onto a path that would soon change everything. Thousands of miles away from Lagos, the cold morning air brushed against the windows of a small apartment where Ada Okafor stood quietly, tying her hair before leaving for work. Her room was simple, just a small bed, a table, and a kettle sitting on the counter. The walls were bare except for one photograph taped near the mirror. A picture of Ada and her husband Chinedu Okafor, smiling together on a sunny day in Lagos years ago. Ada looked at the photo for a moment and smiled softly. All this sacrifice will be worth it, she whispered to herself. Her phone vibrated in her hand as she opened her banking app. After weeks of overtime shifts and exhausting nights, she had finally saved enough again. With a deep breath, she sent another large transfer to Chinedu. Moments later, she recorded a voice note. Chinedu, I've just sent more money, she said warmly. It should help finish the foundation for the house. I can almost picture it already, our home in Lagos. She smiled as she sent the message, grabbed her coat, and stepped out into the cold morning, unaware of what was really happening back home. Meanwhile, the sun shone brightly over Lagos. In a luxurious restaurant overlooking the sparkling Atlantic Ocean, Chinedu sat comfortably at a table filled with expensive dishes. Across from him sat Vanessa Williams, laughing softly as a waiter placed another bottle of wine on the table. Vanessa admired the elegant surroundings. You really know how to live, Chinedu, she said with a teasing smile. Chinedu leaned back confidently, lifting his glass. Success should be enjoyed, he replied smoothly. At that exact moment, his phone vibrated on the table. Ada's message. He glanced at the notification, then casually muted it without listening. Instead, he opened his banking app. The transfer had arrived. Chinedu smiled. Another investment paying off, he joked lightly. Vanessa laughed, completely believing him. Days turned into weeks, and the lies only grew bigger. Ada continued working late nights, scrubbing floors and saving every dollar she could, dreaming of the house being built in Lagos. But there was no construction, no workers, no foundation, only luxury dinners, weekend getaways, and expensive gifts for Vanessa. And whenever Ada called to ask about the progress, Chinedu answered with confidence. The builders are doing great work, he told her one evening. You won't believe how beautiful the place looks now. Ada closed her eyes happily, imagining the home she had worked so hard for. But in Lagos, the truth was far uglier. And very soon, Chinedu's lies were about to grow so big that even he wouldn't be able to escape them. The afternoon sun glowed warmly over Lagos, casting golden light across palm trees and quiet streets in a small neighborhood on the edge of the city. The air smelled faintly of roasted corn from a nearby roadside vendor, and distant music drifted softly through the warm breeze. Inside a beautifully decorated garden venue, a small wedding ceremony was about to begin. White chairs were arranged neatly beneath a flower-covered canopy. Elegant ribbons fluttered gently in the wind, and a handful of invited guests chatted excitedly while waiting for the bride and groom. At the center of it all stood Chinedu Okafor, dressed in a crisp cream-colored suit, adjusting his cufflinks with a confident smile. To everyone present, it looked like the beginning of a happy life. But the truth behind this wedding was far darker. Every decoration, every meal, every expensive detail had been paid for with money sent by his hardworking wife abroad. Money meant for their future. Money meant for their dream home. And yet today, it was being used to marry another woman. Moments later, the music began to play. All eyes turned toward the garden path as Vanessa Williams appeared. She looked radiant in a stunning white gown that shimmered in the sunlight. Her friends smiled proudly as she slowly walked down the aisle, her eyes fixed lovingly on Chinedu. To Vanessa, this moment meant everything. She believed she was marrying a successful businessman. A man with wealth, power, and a promising future. When she finally reached him, she smiled softly. "You really did all this for me?" she whispered, glancing around the beautiful venue. Chinedu nodded confidently. "Of course," he replied smoothly. "A queen deserves nothing less." The small crowd applauded as the officiant stepped forward and began the ceremony. The vows were short, but filled with promises. Promises of loyalty. Promises of love. Promises that Chinedu had already broken long before speaking them. As the officiant finally announced them husband and wife, the guests cheered and clapped while the couple shared their first kiss. Champagne glasses clinked together as the celebration began. Music filled the garden, and laughter echoed into the warm Lagos evening. But far away, thousands of miles from this celebration, Ada Okafor was finishing another exhausting shift at work. Her hands tired, her body aching. Yet she smiled as she checked her phone, believing she was slowly building a beautiful life with the man she trusted most. What she didn't know was that in Lagos, her husband had just married another woman with the very money she sacrificed everything to earn. And this secret would soon begin to unravel in ways none of them expected. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of a modern office building overlooking the busy streets of Lagos. Cars moved endlessly below, horns echoing through the air as the city began another restless day. But far away, in a quiet corporate office thousands of miles from Lagos, Ada Okafor sat confidently at the head of a polished conference table. The woman who once worked endless shifts just to send money home had changed. Years of sacrifice, discipline, and determination had slowly transformed her life. Her small savings had grown into smart investments. The long nights of hard work had turned into opportunity. And now, Ada was no longer just surviving abroad. She was building something powerful. Across the table, two well-dressed business partners reviewed documents spread neatly before them. One of them smiled. "Mrs. Okafor," he said respectfully, sliding a folder toward her. "This is the final agreement. Once you sign, the land acquisition in Lagos will officially belong to your investment group." Ada opened the folder slowly. Inside were the official documents confirming ownership of a large and valuable piece of land in Lagos, a rapidly developing area that would soon become one of the city's most profitable real estate zones. She studied the map carefully. The address looked familiar. Very familiar. Her eyes narrowed slightly as realization began to form. It was the same location Chinedu had mentioned many times during their phone calls. The same land he claimed he was using for their future home and his growing business investments. Ada leaned back in her chair quietly. Something didn't feel right. For months, she had been sending large amounts of money to support that project. Yet she had never seen a single photo of the construction. No receipts. No progress reports. Only words. Promises. And excuses. Her business partner noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Ada closed the folder slowly, her voice calm but firm. "Yes," she said softly. "Everything is becoming very clear." She picked up a pen and signed the final document. With that simple signature, the land was now officially under the control of Ada's investment group. But what Chinedu didn't know was that the land he kept mentioning in his stories now legally belonged to his own wife. Ada stood up and walked toward the window, staring out at the skyline in deep thought. Then she reached for her phone. "I think it's time I returned to Lagos," she said quietly. Her business partners exchanged curious glances. "Earlier than planned?" one asked. Ada nodded slowly, a determined spark now shining in her eyes. "Yes. Because somewhere in Lagos, the truth was waiting, and Ada had finally decided it was time to see it for herself." A humid breeze drifted across the runway as the airplane slowly touched down in Lagos. The early afternoon sun glowed brightly over the sprawling city, reflecting off glass buildings and crowded highways stretching toward the horizon. After years away, Ada Okafor had finally returned home. Passengers moved through the busy airport terminal, their voices blending with announcements echoing overhead. But Ada walked quietly through the crowd, her expression calm and thoughtful. She had not told anyone she was coming, not even her husband. Outside the airport, the familiar energy of Lagos surrounded her immediately. Yellow buses sped past, street vendors called out to customers, and the warm tropical air carried the scent of grilled food and ocean breeze. Ada slipped into the back seat of a taxi. "Madam, where to?" the driver asked. She hesitated for only a moment. "Take me to Lekki Phase 2, she said softly. "There's a construction site there." The taxi pulled into the noisy Lagos traffic, weaving between motorcycles and buses as the city rushed around them. During the drive, Ada stared out the window quietly, remembering the countless phone calls she had shared with her husband about this very place. Chinedu had described it so many times. The large foundation, the workers building the walls, the future home that was slowly taking shape. Her heart beat faster as the taxi finally turned onto a quiet developing road lined with empty plots and scattered buildings. The driver slowed down. "Madam, this is the area," he said. Ada stepped out of the car, her heels crunching softly against the dusty ground. She looked around and froze. The land was empty. No construcción. No workers. No house. Just a wide, silent plot covered with dry grass and scattered stones. For a moment, Ada stood completely still, her mind struggling to understand what she was seeing. This couldn't be right. Chinedu had told her the foundation was already finished months ago. He had promised the walls were being built. Yet there was nothing. Not even a single brick. A man wearing a reflective vest walked across the nearby road, carrying a clipboard. Ada quickly approached him. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Are you the site manager here?" The man shook his head slightly. "No construction has started here, madam," he replied casually. "This land has been empty for years." Ada felt something inside her chest tighten painfully. Years. Her phone suddenly felt heavy in her hand. For so long she had trusted every word Chinedu told her. Every promise. Every update. Now the truth was standing silently in front of her. And slowly, the sadness in her eyes began to turn into something far stronger. Anger. Because if the house never existed, then neither did the life Chinedu had been describing. And Ada knew this was only the beginning of the truth she was about to uncover. The evening sky over Lagos slowly darkened as city lights flickered on one by one. Cars crawled through traffic, and the distant sound of street music echoed through the humid night air. Inside a quiet hotel room overlooking the busy streets below, Ada Okafor sat on the edge of the bed, her phone resting tightly in her hands. Her mind was still racing after what she had seen earlier that day. The empty land. The lies. The missing house. But Ada knew one thing for certain now. If the house was a lie, then there were probably many more. And she was determined to find them. She opened her phone and slowly began searching through social media, typing her husband's name, Chinedu Okafor. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Photos of parties, dinners, and nights out with friends filled the screen. But as she continued scrolling, something strange caught her eye. A tagged photo. Ada tapped it. The image loaded slowly, and when it finally appeared, the world seemed to stop. In the photograph, Chinedu stood smiling in an elegant cream-colored suit. Beside him stood a beautiful woman in a white wedding gown, her arm wrapped around his, their fingers intertwined. Behind them, guests clapped and cheered. Ada's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the picture, her heart pounding. Another photo appeared beneath it. Then another. Wedding decorations. Champagne glasses raised in celebration. And in the center of every picture was the same woman, Vanessa Williams. The caption below one of the photos read, "Congratulations to the beautiful couple." Ada's fingers trembled as she opened Vanessa's profile. Dozens of pictures appeared. Romantic dinners. Luxury trips. Smiling selfies. And there, clearly visible in several posts, was Chinedu, laughing, holding Vanessa close, living a life Ada had never even imagined. One particular photo froze Ada completely. It was their wedding day. The same ceremony Chinedu had never mentioned. The same vows he had already promised to Ada years ago. For a long moment, Ada said nothing. The pain inside her chest felt sharp and overwhelming, like something breaking apart deep inside her heart. Tears slowly filled her eyes. But she did not cry. Instead, she took a long, steady breath and wiped her face. The sadness in her expression slowly faded. And in its place, something else appeared. Resolve. Ada gently placed the phone on the table and stood up, walking toward the window overlooking the glowing Lagos skyline. The truth was now clear. Chinedu hadn't just wasted her money. He had built an entire life with another woman. But what he didn't know was that the woman he had betrayed was no longer the same wife he once took for granted. And very soon, Ada would make sure he understood exactly what that meant. Morning light poured across the modern skyline of Lagos, reflecting off tall glass buildings and busy highways already alive with traffic. Inside a sleek office tower on Victoria Island, Ada Okafor sat calmly at the head of a long conference table. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. Across from her sat two sharply dressed lawyers reviewing several thick folders of documents. Ada's expression was composed, almost unreadable. But behind that calm surface, every detail of her plan was already in motion. One of the lawyers adjusted his glasses and slid a document toward her. "Mrs. Okafor," he said carefully, "we've confirmed everything. The apartment currently occupied by Chinedu Okafor is legally owned by Coral Crest Properties." Ada nodded slowly. "And Coral Crest Properties," she replied quietly, "is controlled by my investment group." The lawyer smiled slightly. "That is correct." Ada leaned back in her chair. For years, she had trusted Chinedu completely. Every transfer she sent, every sacrifice she made abroad, was meant to build their future. Instead, he had used her money to build a lie. But now the truth was working in her favor. Another lawyer opened a second file. "We also checked the company he claims to run," he continued. "There is no registered business under his name. No tax filings. No legitimate operations." Ada's eyes sharpened. Exactly as she expected. Outside the office window, Lagos moved endlessly. Cars honking, vendors shouting, the city alive with energy. But inside the room, the air felt still and precise, like the calm before a storm. Ada picked up a pen. "Then let's begin," she said firmly. Within hours, the legal wheels began turning. At the luxury apartment where Chinedu now lived with Vanessa Williams, the morning started like any other. Vanessa lounged comfortably on the couch scrolling through her phone while Chinedu poured himself coffee in the kitchen. Then a loud knock echoed through the apartment door. Chinedu frowned and opened it. Two sharply dressed men stood outside. "Good morning, sir," one of them said calmly, handing him an envelope. "Official notice from Coral Crest Properties." Chinedu opened it casually at first. But as he read the letter, the color slowly drained from his face. "Eviction notice?" he muttered in disbelief. At that same moment, his phone vibrated repeatedly in his hand. Bank notifications. Account restrictions. Transaction failures. His accounts were frozen. Vanessa sat upright, confusion crossing her face. "Chinedu, what's happening?" But Chinedu had no answer. Because somewhere across the city, Ada stood quietly by a window in her office, watching the Lagos skyline. The trap had been set, and Chinedu's world was about to collapse piece by piece. The afternoon sun glared harshly over the busy streets of Lagos, reflecting off glass towers and dusty roads alike. In a once luxurious apartment on Victoria Island, the air felt unusually heavy, thick with tension and disbelief. Chinedu Okafor stood frozen in the center of the living room, papers scattered at his feet, a mix of eviction notices, bank freeze confirmations, and legal letters cluttering the floor. The man who had spent months spinning lies and living lavishly now looked small, exposed, and utterly helpless. Vanessa, dressed in a sleek black outfit, stood at the doorway. Her eyes, once filled with admiration and excitement, now burned with fury and betrayal. She held Chinedu's phone, scrolling through notifications that confirmed every nightmare she had yet to imagine. This can't be real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "All this time you lied? You're broke? None of this, any of this is yours." Chinedu opened his mouth, stammering. "Vanessa, I can explain. It's just..." "No," she snapped, cutting him off sharply. "I trusted you. I believed every word. And you built your life on my belief. On lies." The sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor echoed as she turned to grab her bag. She paused only to glance once at Chinedu, her face unreadable but filled with finality. "Goodbye, Chinedu," she said, voice low but firm. And just like that, Vanessa walked out, leaving the apartment silent except for the faint hum of traffic outside. Chinidu sank onto the sofa, staring blankly at the scattered papers, his stomach twisting with panic. The weight of every lie he had told, every dollar he had spent, crashed down on him at once. He had lost everything, his mistress, his apartment, his imagined wealth. Even the image of success he had projected to the world now seemed like a cruel illusion. Somewhere across the city, standing tall in her office with the Lagos skyline behind her, Ada Okafor watched the aftermath unfold quietly. She had not needed to raise her voice or confront him directly. The law, her planning, and her resolve had spoken for her. Chinidu's world, built on betrayal and greed, was crumbling brick by brick. And in that silence, as the city thrummed on outside, one thing was clear. No lie could withstand the truth. No deception could escape consequences. Chinidu had gambled with trust and love, and in the end he had lost everything. The storm of humiliation was complete, setting the stage for the final reckoning. The late afternoon sun bathed the streets of Lagos in a warm, golden glow. The bustling city seemed unaware of the quiet confrontation unfolding in a small office overlooking the Atlantic's shimmering waters. Chinidu Okafor stood hunched near the glass window, his shoulders heavy with shame. The once confident man now looked small, defeated. His voice shook as he called out, "Ada, please. I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but please forgive me." From across the room, Ada Okafor stood tall and composed, her eyes calm yet filled with unwavering resolve. She didn't rush to respond. Instead, she allowed the quiet hum of Lagos outside to fill the silence. The honking cars, the laughter of children playing nearby, and the soft wind brushing through palm trees created a serene backdrop to Chinidu's trembling words. I was wrong. I never should have. He stammered, desperation lacing his tone. Ada stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. She looked directly at him, her gaze steady and unyielding. "Chinidu," she said slowly, her voice firm yet measured. "It's not about forgiveness anymore. It's about understanding. Trust is more valuable than any amount of money you could spend or lie about." Chinidu's eyes widened, tears glistening as the weight of his actions settled fully upon him. "But Ada, I can make it right. I'll repay." "No," Ada interrupted, a quiet authority in her tone. "You won't. Because trust once broken cannot be bought back with gold or promises. You've squandered everything that mattered." The golden sunlight caught her face, illuminating a calm strength that Chinidu could never have imagined. For years, she had sacrificed, worked tirelessly, and endured betrayal. Now she was finally free, from lies, from deceit, and from the man who had taken her loyalty for granted. Ada turned away, walking gracefully toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. She gazed out at the sprawling city, the ocean waves glinting in the sunlight below. Each step echoed with confidence, independence, and resilience. Chinidu sank to the floor, his voice reduced to a whisper. "Ada, please." But she didn't look back. She stepped out into the streets of Lagos, the bustling city alive around her, ready to build a life rooted in honesty, strength, and self-worth. Each stride she took was a promise to herself. A promise that she would no longer let anyone dictate her destiny or diminish her value. And as she disappeared into the golden city horizon, one truth remained clear. Some lessons can only be learned through loss, and some strength can only emerge from betrayal. Ada had reclaimed hers,